Yeah, welcome back to Yes It Is, Breakfast on GBNEWS with Paul and Anne this morning. Time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning is the broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon and the writer and political commentator Emma Webb, and there's lots to talk about, but Claire, starting with Salman Rushdie.
Yeah, in the Telegraph, in fact, all the papers, as we know this morning. The shocking stabbing of Salman Rushdie at a New York book literary festival that has just been completely out of the blue. Emma, do you want to chip in here and give us a bit of background as to why this actually happened or how it might have happened?
In 1989, a year after the book was originally published,
This is the Satanic Verses.
Iran issued a fatwa against Salman Rushdie. So it's been 33 years of initially Rushdie had to basically hide from his own children, moving from place to place to avoid being murdered as a result of this fatwa. And he's had threats against his life many, many years. Now had started to move into a phase of his life where he was less concerned about security, he was going about his life more as normal. But more recently, an Islamic religious association in Iran, an organization, had raised the bounty on his head. And so obviously the security threat never went away. But this just goes to show that even though the fatwa was in some ways technically rescinded, it couldn't be, because the Ayatollah who had initially put out this death this call for...
It's an instruction, isn't it, to all the faithful to go out of their way to try and murder
with a bounty.
With a bounty.
It's a religious demand that people would go out and seek to, as Iran put it, annihilate him. And actually,
but not only him.
Has been celebrated.
But not only him. People who were
translator.
In 1989, the Japanese translator was stabbed to death in Japan. Someone in Oslo, a Swedish man in Oslo as well, stabbed, but he didn't die, thankfully. So anyone associated with the book, even if you were caught reading it, you could be killed.
Now that's an interesting one, because how many people have ever read it? Well, have you tried?
I have read it.
You've read the whole thing?
I have, and I think actually the people who are calling for these death threats against Salman Rushdie's life, I think most of them, if not all of them, potentially haven't actually read the book. It could be blank pages on the inside and people would still be burning it.
In your view, how offensive is it?
I mean, I don't...
Because what I read, I didn't sort of
As far as blasphemy goes, I don't think that the book is particularly offensive, but obviously many Muslims did find it very offensive. But that this is a point that Douglas Murray has made, is that when this whole row initially broke out, it's the same thing as we saw with the Jyllands-Posten cartoon affair, the Danish
Charlie
Hebdo. You had people coming out saying, well, on the one hand this, on the other hand this. Yes, it's bad that people are calling for them to be killed, but on the other hand, they did something that was offensive. That is completely unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. And actually, I think this is a really important reminder that there is still a teacher in this country who is in hiding for showing supposedly offensive and blasphemous cartoons to his class. That man is still in hiding with his young family, and this is a reminder that these threats are very real and that we have a free speech crisis internationally, because there are some people who think that their feelings of offence and blasphemy justify murder.
And we still haven't had an update yet, but very clearly his agent has said that all the nerves in one arm have been severed, and his liver, and he's likely to lose an eye, and he's 75. An attack like that is you just wonder if he's going to get through it.
Just one small thing on the Salman Rushdie thing. When he was living in London under security, he used the name Joseph Anton, because his favourite authors were Chekhov and Joseph Conrad. And I thought, in fact, subsequently he wrote almost a memoir of his life titled Joseph Anton, or Anton Joseph, which is quite nice.
On the flip side of that, the assailant who has been arrested, the suspect in this, he used an alias himself, a fake ID, using the name of a leader of Hezbollah. And on his social media, you can see very clearly how much he idolized the Ayatollahs and Hezbollah and Iranian militants.
Yeah, he wasn't even born when the Satanic Verses was written. It just shows that fatwa is still there and still hanging out. It's utterly changed Rushdie's life. Completely. He's a Booker Prize Prize winner. He's written about 22 books, and but utterly changed and presumably his family as well.
You know, there's always an extension to someone under these terrible, terrible atrocities and under this.
And if he gets through this, it won't have gone away.
No, of course it won't have. Of course it won't.
Let's move on to happier stories like a drought.
Well, I thought this was really funny. The front page of the Daily Star. Look at that headline. Nice beavers, no euphemism made. And no dirty comments, Mr. Hawkins, please.
You know, apparently that's one area, is it in Cornwall or somewhere like that, where they haven't got too bad a drought problem because the beavers are so good at building dams.
Yeah. Exactly.
That they've actually conserved the water.
I was listening actually to one environmental expert yesterday who was saying that he was praising that kind of natural way of conserving water within the landscape.
Yes, well, yes, it's the leave it to the wildlife.
Right, so
they got more sense than us.
One of our viewers wrote in and said, what was it about the weather? Just warning, weather.
Warning, there's weather
Warning,
about.
there's weather about, you know? Come on, can we just get over it?
Okay, we go from the drought then to, British Airways are going to ration champagne. I mean, this is a real worry.
This is an absolute travesty, because do you know what? British Airways don't even pay for their alcohol. Their alcohol is given to British Airways, so there is absolutely no need.
Who's giving them? Who?
The champagne houses and the wine houses and everything, the beer people, they give their alcohol to British Airways. British Airways do not pay for the alcohol on flights, and nor in their lounges either.
Probably if they're cutting back on champagne, people will be buying other alcohol instead that they do pay for, and so they're hoarding the champagne.
But if you're travelling in business, you don't pay for it. That's the whole thing. And now the CEO of British Airways has now said, thankfully, that he's getting rid of the M&S sandwiches in cattle class, and you can actually get your free drink and your free snack, etc., etc. So this is actually fake news. So next time you're on a BA flight, just remind them.
Yeah,
it's not actually.
So you're not even paying for that champagne.
You're not paying for it.
Yeah.
At least it's not a crisis at the source of champagne, because people who are worried that when we run out of bottled water that maybe they could turn to champagne, that's still on the table.
Yes.
Yeah.
Emma, in the Daily Mail, Grant Shapps has been dealing out a warning to rail militants, they say, which suggests the government isn't even listening at the moment, because while there are strikes all over the place and ordinary people are having their summer ruined, frankly, it suggests from what he's saying that the government isn't even bothered.
I think that this actually suggests that the government are listening to the commuters. I think Grant Shapps is really concerned about the damage that this is wreaking. I mean, these train strikes are causing not only disruption to people's lives, to their holidays, to their summer, but it's also going to be harming the economy at a time when we really don't need additional burdens. You know, all of this news about droughts, about the cost of living crisis, the last thing that people need is something that is basically a sort of man-made disaster for the country. And so what Grant Shapps is suggesting here in today's Daily Mail, it reports that they're basically putting forward new legislation serving these warnings under something called Section 188 to the rail companies. Network Rail are hoping to force through the changes to modernise the way that the railways are run, things like getting rid of guardless trains. And I think that what he's trying to do, yes, there's a sort of Thatcherite aspect to this, if he wants to smash the unions, support people's right to strike, but I think that what he's doing here is actually responding to a very real problem, which is that Mick Lynch and the unions are really holding the country at ransom. This is critical infrastructure. It's not acceptable to keep disrupting people's lives in this way. And actually they have been offered things, and it's a resistance against modernising the railways, something that we really need as a nation.
But in terms of public opinion and winning over the public, would you? A lot of people get why they are going on strike. Yeah.
Yeah.
They do understand.
I get why they are.
I think so, and I think that people who sympathise with not only the rail workers striking, but also with nurses striking and others. I think people do sympathise with that. But when you see it being, for example, ASLEF, who represent the train drivers striking, people who earn actually, in comparison to the average wage in this country, an awful lot of money, I think that actually that whatever public opinion is in favour of that is not going to last much longer if they continue to do this.
Is it political? Do you feel there's a sort of groundswell of lots and lots of strikes? Here we are waiting to hear who our next Prime Minister is going to be. But nevertheless, we're probably only about 18 months away from a general election, aren't we?
I don't think it's political. I think it is the need for the common man and woman to actually stand up for their rights, because rights have been erroneously taken over throughout these past 2 years. Our human rights have been violated in terms of lockdowns and everything else, and mask wearing, etc., etc. I think it's just a resistance. I think people now are just waking up to what's happening. And yes, I take the point of the salaries of real drivers, but they weren't the ones that initialised the actual strikes. The real for the RSMT, they weren't part of it. And I think Mick Lynch has become quite a voluble person to come out and say, look, this isn't actually what's going on here. And he's managed to tease out rather calmly and very effectively, I think, to actually communicate with us, the people, about why they're doing it. I think he's done a really good job. Yes, I get the fact that the country is being held to ransom. There's very emotive language, but in all honesty with you, last year it was cheaper to fly than take the train. We've had issues with the trains for years, and they've just recently been nationalised in terms of railway tracks, etc. The government took ownership of them again. And, we don't want to talk about ScotFail in Scotland, because the results up there have been deplorable, as have much of the SNP legacy. But back to the rail strikes. Yes, it's sad, but I think it's communication. And yes, we need to move on. Things do change. Driverless trains. I don't think guardless trains would be a good idea from personal safety. From that point of view, there's loads to discuss.
You know what RMT stands for?
No.
Really Mad Train Staff. Yeah, there you go. Right.
Yeah.
On that note,
we better move on, I think.
Terrible note. We'll leave it there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. We'll talk more of that later on.